Hello folks. I thought I would take a look at Sequence Generator Pro, which is the acquisition software that I use, and kind of go through a step-by-step setup that I would do, or I had to do. I've been about a 5-year user of Sequence Generator Pro, and I remember when I first got it, I installed it and I opened it, and I got so daggone confused about really where to begin, and I started reading the manual, the online manual, and it became so daunting for me at the time that I just closed it and said to myself, a cloudy night, another day, I'll pick it up. And I was very comfortable with using Backyard EOS for Nikon, and Astro Tortilla, which was my plate solving software, and of course PhD2, which I use with Sequence Generator Pro also. But I was familiar and had all of that up and running, so there wasn't I wasn't under the gun to really learn Sequence Generator Pro, but I owned it, and I knew eventually I was going to have to dive in. I'm sure there were some tutorials on how to set it up, but I am not familiar with, I didn't find any. I know there are quite a few tutorials out there today, and thank goodness that they are, because new users need those. But I thought I would add my 2 cents to it, and so let's take a look at it. I may have a bit of lag time because I'm connecting to you through a Wi-Fi setup. I'm using an iMac, and the laptop computers I use at the remote observatory, those laptops are all Windows 10 machines, and I just purchased a new Windows 10 operating system and machine, a Dell, and I loaded Sequence Generator Pro to it about a month ago, and I've started setting up the profiles, and that's when it occurred to me how difficult that was for me initially, and so I thought that's where I would begin. When you buy Sequence Generator Pro and first boot it up, it doesn't give you really any, I think it opens up a bunch of these windows, a lot of which I would never use. I don't have an observatory with a slide off roof or a dome. I don't have a flat panel that is automated, and so there's some things I don't have, but the things that I do have, I wanted to have available. So I always want to see my histogram, and I am not absolutely, I don't absolutely need to have the telescope's position. I do like to see the running time before peer flip is going to take place, but I don't use these settings to set the park the mount, and I'm a EQ mode user, so I use EQ ASCOM and its virtual hand controller to make my telescope adjustments and settings. I do, though, want to see image statistics, and so you have the ability to open up, say, the telescope, or let's pick up something, observatory, And if you want to add that to something, then you just add it over and drop it, and it will build a tab for it. Now, if you've got plenty of room, you can just make space for it. And but if you don't have room, then you're going to have to add it as a tab. But all of these icons up here, every one of them with the exception of the control panel and the sequencer, and actually all of these up through here, from this line, all of these are just functions of Sequence Generator Pro. These are all the things, though, from the image histogram all the way out here to the license, well, out here to the focus lock. All of those are windows that you could open up and make a permanent part of your interface. So I have an automatic focuser on my remote setups. I have 3 remote setups. I have 3 telescope systems, 3 different mounts. Well, they're Atlas Pro mounts, but there are 3 different mounts. I run 3 different telescopes. One is used mostly in the day, and it's equipped with solar telescopes and quark chromospheres. So until I change that, I'm only using that for daytime solar work. But the other 2 telescopes are for deep space and planetary imaging. So I like, in fact, all of my laptops that have Sequence Generator Pro essentially have these same windows. They do have automatic focusers. They're moonlight focusers, and so I like to have the focus control handy. I also I have both one-shot color cameras, CCD cameras, and CMOS cameras, and DSLR cameras, and so I don't use filters with those. But I also have, and I mainly do mono imaging, so I do have filters. The environmental data is somewhat handy to have, and at the same time I'm using Pegasus Ultimate Powerbox 2, and this software has a lot of environmental information for me. It gives me the current temperature, relative humidity, dew point. It graphs it for me, and I can pretty much tell when dew is going to start accumulating. Also, this power box sends the right amount of current to the dew heaters, as it's also tied into the dew point, and so it will not turn the dew heaters on until it's needed, and then it will only send enough current to take care of what it knows to be the issue of dew, and so it's very accommodating. It works extremely well. But let's get out of the power box. But I do like, and it does populate, there is a sensor with the Pegasus power box, and it's attached to the kits outside, and it feeds back this information, and it's handy to have, but I rarely look at it. So filter and focus primarily. And over here I have frame and focus, and I have PhD2, and really this is just a mirror image of what's going on my PhD guiding software, which is a altogether different software program. This is connected to PhD2, and I'll show you when we go through the setup how that works. So I would say that this main window here is going to be part of your interface that you'll want to keep handy. You will identify your targets and add your targets. You can have more than one. You can have as many as you want. You may want to image one or more targets a night, and there's probably a limit to how many targets you could actually image, but there's no limit to how many you can add. You have the ability to select where you want to save your information. You have the ability to give your file names um, the extensions that you want, so that in my case, I want to know if it's a light frame, I want the target information, I want to know what the exposure was, I want to know what the binning was, and then this is the number that was taken. When I'm using CMOS cameras, I'm not concerned about binning because I don't bin with them, but with the CCD cameras I do. But this is where you can browse and select the directory. Once you have created a profile, then your user profile will be located here. And mine is just called the Overstreet Observatory, and it has my location information and some other data. This part of the sequencing window is where you connect your camera, and you just click on these icons. This is where you connect the filter wheel, the focuser, and for me, my mount is the EQ ASCOM. And when I open this up, my virtual hand controller also opens. This is where I will select the Pegasus observing sensor that's located outside on my telescopes, and I'll connect that, and it's through this connection that this information over here on environment is populated. So I don't have a flat box, I don't have a rotator or an observatory, and nor do I have a safety monitor, but had I had those, I could connect all of those things as well. And this is just really telling you how powerful and accommodating Sequence Generator Pro is, because it can manhandle all of these different features. When you connect your camera, it's connected, but if you want to cool your camera, you're going to have to go over here and start the cooling process manually. However, you can make selections, which we'll look at later on automatically setting up your camera to cool whenever, let's say, you turn Sequence Generator on. I don't do that. I would prefer to do it manually, because sometimes I start the software and I start the camera, but I am or connect the camera. I just want to make sure everything is connected. I am not ready to start imaging yet, so I don't really want the camera cooler running for an hour or two before we begin the imaging session. And then down here is how you set up your sequences. You have the ability to decide if you're going to run this sequence, or you may want to add a new event, which just adds another line of sequence info. But let's say, I'm going to jump ahead here, but to give you an idea, let's say that you wanted to take a light frame and you were going to use your loom filter, and now you give them the name you want, but I would just put down L, because this goes into the file name. And the exposure time, you might want to expose for 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, or you just may want to type in 300 minutes, and you may want to have 10 of those. So what will happen is that Sequence Generator Pro will run all of these that are checked and no more. If you uncheck these two, then the only ones that will run will be these 300 lume filtered images. You can also select to have dark, flat, or bias frames, and the Sequence Generator Pro will put those in. They'll create the directories for each of the bias, light, dark, so that those are kept separate in the saving of the files. And then you might have your red filter and green filter and blue filter, and I would type in R for red, green for blue, green for green, a G for green, and too late for me, and B for blue. Let's be realistic. Let's say you're going to take a 30-second loom and a 120 green and a 120-second blue and a 120-second, and let's say you're going to take 10, 10, 10, and you have all of these clicked. Well, they'll tell you right here you've got an hour and 5 minutes of imaging time. That doesn't count the dithering and the time between filter changes, and it doesn't tell you the time. It doesn't include the time of automatic focusing. So there's more things going on between images that add to the time, but the total amount of actual imaging time is also important, because if you know you want to get 10 hours of data of imaging time, then in order to bring the best out of an object target, then this is where you'll be able to see that happens. Also, it's here that when you click on this wheel, you have the ability to see the location of your target, and you can slew to it. When your mount is connected, this won't be grayed out, and you can also center it, and that's called plate solving. So this wheel, once those coordinates have been added, these will slew your mount to the target, and it will center it for you. And you can go to planning tools, and in planning tools it will show you graphically when all of these things have been connected and your target has been identified. It'll show you graphically the arc that your target will take throughout the night and where it currently is, and it will populate all of these boxes with information from when it's going to transit, and so far you can set your start time, end time, so you can automate this whole process if you choose to do that. Start time, end time can be set as there, but if you set it over in the other part of the planning tools, it will automatically populate that for you. But we'll dive into this and how to set up a target, how to add a target, and how the plate solving works. But right now, let's just click out of this. And so far, the only other thing that I'm going to show you very quickly before I end this video and pick up the next video with setting up a profile is that this box right here is where you're going to add all of the information pertinent to your camera, your filters, your focuser, your telescope, the choice of software catalogs you're going to use to plate solve, and the guide software you're going to use, which I'm going to guess would be PhD2. And this is a little bit of a challenge, but we're going to go through each one of these tabs, and we're going to show you how to make the settings work, enter this very important part of the camera setup, where you have the scale of your camera and the size of your camera sensor in pixels, and the guesstimate of the readout noise for your camera. You want to make sure that you have high-speed download checked. Here's where you can, I want to cool the camera when the sequence starts, warm up when the sequence completes. Excuse me, cool down when the camera connects. And again, I don't have that checked. I manually turn it off and on. This is where you're going to add your filters. You're going to define your filter list. I've already done mine. I have a 7-position filter wheel. I just created this. I just type this in, and I added the length of the automatic exposure to when I do focusing. So I'm going to have an 8-second exposure to plate solve with luminosity. I'm going to have a 15-second exposure if I plate solve with red, and so forth. You can also, later I'll go into how you set up your focus points, and that's for right now just an overview. Focus, it's here that you set up your automatic focuser settings and how often you want to focus. Every so many minutes can be selected. Every so many temperature degree changes it can automatic focus. I always have it set to autofocus on a filter change and before I start imaging. You can pick the method by which you focus. I use half flux radius, but you can use the full width half max. If you do, you're going to have pinpoint, and I do have pinpoint. This is where your exposure time for your filters, but in my case I already have that set up here. For one-shot color cameras, I just have 1 second. I'll show you how to fill in these dialog boxes with populate these and how to calculate what your step size is. Very important. And in telescope, you're going to need the focal length of your telescope, the aperture, how many seconds you want for settling the mic. If you're going to do a auto meridian flip, and if you have any specific settings you want to wait. You just want to wait for the meridian. You want to wait for 10 minutes past the meridian. You can make some changes to this if you choose. I also like to have park when the sequence completes and checked, and I haven't checked that yet. Then we get to plate solve, and there's 2 plate solve programs that I use. I use plate solve 2 and I use pinpoint. Now pinpoint is a paid for plate solving software package, and but I recommend it. I recommend having it because it works extremely well, and as does plate solve 2. But there'll be situations when on any given night I'll try using, say, plate solve 2, and it'll run several different times and the mount doesn't seem to move many pixels, and I'll say, well, let's give pinpoint a shot. I'll try pinpoint and it plate solves on the first run. So I don't get it, but it just happens, and it can happen the other way around where I can't get a solve with pinpoint, but I'll try plate solve 2 and it just solves. So it's kind of mount and software related. I don't know how those bugs ever get worked out, if they even do. I just know having 2 plate solve programs helps. Auto guide, of course, for me, I didn't activate, is using PhD2 and setting it up. So I haven't even created the path for it yet because it's that new. I'm setting this up now myself. Settle time, how long you want to wait for, and how often you're going to dither, whether you want an extreme dither. I usually do just a high dither. I dither every frame. And the other things you can deal with, and I don't, are the flat box, the rotator, the observatory settings. So, but we'll dive into how to set up a profile and go through the actual setting up of some profiles. That's kind of give you a bit of an overview of Sequence Generator Pro. It does everything but burp the baby, and I think Jared and his partner for having created it sure makes life easier for me, and a night of imaging a whole lot more fun. So with that being said, I hope everybody has clear skies. If you would please consider liking, and also consider subscribing, and if you do, click the bell, and I think they'll notify you each time I make a new video. With that being said, I will catch you on the turnaround, and we'll dive deeper into the creating of profiles.